I still remember the wind of that morning in 1206. Cold, sharp, almost alive. I was standing on the endless Mongolian plains, watching the sun slowly rise behind the mountains. The grass moved like waves under the touch of the wind, and for a moment, everything looked peaceful, calm, untouched. But I knew the truth. That morning was not ordinary. That morning belonged to the men who were about to change the world. The world did not know it yet, but the storm had already formed. It had a name that would echo through centuries, the Horseman of Death. And at the center of this rising storm was a man who looked no different than any other warrior, yet carried something inside him that no other man on earth had. His name was Temujin, soon to be known as Genghis Khan, the leader who would unleash the Mongol invasion that began in 1206 and shake the entire world like an earthquake. I stood there, watching the small shapes of riders appear on the horizon. One rider, then two, then 10, then 100. Their horses moved with a speed that felt unnatural. Dust rose behind them like smoke from fire, and the air, which was cold just moments ago, now felt warmer, like something deadly was getting closer. I knew I was watching the beginning of something the world was not prepared for. The land of 1206, a world waiting for a master. The Mongolian steppe in 1206 was a place of silence and violence, a place where men learned to ride before they learned to walk, a place where you could travel for days without seeing a single village, but hear the sound of horses every night. Life here was simple, but harsh. Every breath was a fight, every sunrise a challenge, every enemy a reminder that death was never too far away. For years tribes fought tribes, brothers fought brothers, leaders rose and fell like the changing of seasons. Nobody ruled this land completely. But in 1206, everything changed. That year all the tribes, tired of endless bloodshed, looked toward one man, Temujin. He was not a king by birth. He was not a prince. He was a man shaped by hunger, betrayal, and pain. A man who saw his father poisoned, his family abandoned, his childhood stolen. A man who survived because he refused to die. And now, that same man was ready to claim the entire world. The gathering of the clans. That morning, on the plains of 1206, I watched thousands of warriors gather together. Each tribe arrived with their banners, their horses, their weapons, their old wounds, and their new hopes. The smell of sweat and leather filled the air. Bows hung from every rider's shoulder. Long knives glowed under the sun. Quivers were full of arrows, not ordinary ones, but arrows known to fly farther than any other arrow in the world. The steppe was changing right in front of me. The noise grew louder. Horses snorted. Hooves stomped. Warriors shouted, commands to each other, and at the center of it all, on a small wooden platform, a man stood tall, Temujin. His eyes scanned the crowd slowly, not like a man looking at soldiers, but like a wolf staring at the pack he was about to lead into the hunt of a lifetime. Silence fell, and in that silence he spoke, not loudly, but with a voice that cut through the air like a blade. The moment that created the Horseman of Death. That day, that one moment, was the birth of something the world had never seen before. The tribes lifted Temujin on their shoulders and declared him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the king of all men, the master of the steppes. It was not just a ceremony. It was the forging of an empire wrapped inside one man's will. A shadow passed through the crowd, a silent understanding that something unstoppable had begun. The Mongol warriors, standing shoulder to shoulder, were no longer a group of scattered tribes. They were one army, one nation, one unstoppable force. And their leader was a man who believed the world belonged to the brave, and he was the bravest of them all. That day marked the start of the Mongol invasion of 1206, the beginning of the march of the horsemen of death. The first ride, a ruthless test. Before the world could understand what was happening, Genghis Khan tested his new army. He gathered his generals, men who would one day become legends: Jebe, Subutai, Hubilai, Kasar. Names whispered with fear long after their bones had turned to dust. They rode together across the plain, their horses moving so fast that the air behind them split into waves. Dust followed them like a cloak. Their eyes were cold, sharp, focused. Genghis Khan raised his hand. Thousands of riders stopped instantly, all at once, like they shared a single soul. Then he gave only one command: ride. That word was simple, but the meaning behind it was deadly. The riders bent forward, touched their horses' necks, whispered something only their horses understood, and then launched into a speed that felt impossible to believe. The invasion had begun, with no kingdoms attacked yet, no cities burned yet, no enemies slain yet. But the world had already lost, because the horsemen of death were now in motion. The horsemen, spirits of fear. If you saw them for the first time, you would never forget them. They moved like smoke. They struck like lightning. They disappeared like shadows. A Mongol warrior carried a bow that could pierce armor, 2 quivers with more than 60 arrows, a long spear, a dagger, a lasso, a small shield, and sometimes 2 or 3 spare horses. They could ride day and night without stopping, sleep on horseback for hours, eat while riding, fight while riding. They did not fear hunger, they did not fear death, and they did not fear any kingdom or king. Everywhere they went, fear went before them. Villages locked their gates. Birds left the sky. Smoke rose in the distance. People did not say, "The Mongols are coming." They said, "Death is coming." When the earth shook. I remember one night in the same year, 1206. I was sitting near a small fire, warming my hands. The stars above were bright, scattered like broken glass across the sky. Then, I felt it. A vibration under the soil. Weak at first, then stronger, then so strong that the fire almost went out. It was not an earthquake. It was something worse. It was the sound of thousands of horses approaching. So many that the earth itself seemed afraid. Voices rose in the darkness, deep, rough, powerful. The riders came into view, their silhouettes black against the dim firelight. Their eyes looked like glowing stones. Their breath formed white clouds in the cold air. And the moment they passed, my fire died completely. That was the first time I understood why the world called them the horsemen of death. The first blood of 1206, Genghis Khan did not wait long. Within months, he turned his army toward nearby tribes and lands that refused to join him. He gave them the choice: bow or break. Most broke. Those who resisted were wiped out so quickly that the world took its first glance at what the Mongol invasion truly meant. Villages burned. Enemies disappeared. Entire tribes vanished from the map. It was not cruelty. It was strategy. A message was being carved into the world. If you resist, you die. If you join, you live. Simple, cold, effective. And every victory made the horsemen stronger. The spread of whispers. By the end of that year, 1206, lands far away from Mongolia began whispering stories. They come like a black wind. They shoot arrows without missing. They ride without resting. They talk little, fight much. They are not men. They are something else. Fear traveled faster than the horses. Sometimes fear arrived days before the actual riders. And that fear became the second weapon of the Mongol invasion. People began to believe that these horsemen weren't human at all, that they were sent by the sky, that their leader had been chosen by heaven to conquer everything. Whether it was true or not, one thing was clear: no one could stop them. The night before the storm. The last scene I remember from that year is still fresh in my mind. Genghis Khan stood on a small hill, alone. The moon was behind him, making his shadow long on the ground. His horse was silent, breathing slow, steady breaths. His bow hung on one side, shining in the pale light. He looked at the sky, then at the earth, and then at his army, resting below like a sleeping dragon. I heard him whisper, not to me, not to anyone else, but to the wind. Tomorrow the world changes. And he was right, because in 1206 the first spark had been lit, a spark that would grow into the largest empire the world had ever seen, a spark that would soon burn cities, kingdoms, and empires, a spark carried by the horsemen of death. The year 1206 did not end quietly. It carried the sound of hooves, the weight of steel, and the cold breath of coming destruction. When the tribes united under Genghis Khan, the world changed. But the world had not yet seen that change. It had only heard whispers, echoes carried by merchants, rumors told by travelers, fear passed from one trembling voice to another. But in part two, the whispers turn into reality. This is where the invasion becomes unstoppable. This is where the horsemen of death truly show the world what they are. The first great march. I still remember the morning the army moved. A cold wind was blowing, strong enough to shake the tents. Flags whipped in the air like angry snakes. The horses were restless, stomping the ground, creating a deep rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The heartbeat of the Mongol invasion. Genghis Khan rode in front. No golden crown, no shining armor, no fancy robe. Just a simple leather coat, a bow on his back, and eyes that held the fire of a man who wanted the world. Behind him, thousands of riders waited. Their horses snorted clouds of white mist. Their bows hung ready. Their arrows were sharp, polished, deadly. Every rider carried enough weapons to kill dozens. The moment Genghis Khan raised his arm, silence fell across the entire plain. Then he shouted one word, "Forward." That was the beginning. The beginning of the Mongol invasion of 1206. The beginning of the march of the horsemen of death. Riding into the unknown. No one talked during the march. No one sang. No one laughed. Their silence was their strength. The Mongols believed that words could weaken focus, and focus was the only thing they needed. Hours passed, days passed. They rode without stopping. When their horses tired, they switched mounts. When hunger struck, they ate dried meat while riding. When thirst hit, they cut the vein of the horse and drank a little blood. Not enough to harm the animal, but enough to survive. This army was not human. It was a moving machine made of flesh, bone, and iron will. And I was riding with them, watching, learning, fear growing inside me each day like a shadow. Because I knew the world had never seen anything like them. The first target, the unwilling tribe. The invasion did not start with a kingdom. It did not start with a grand city. It started with a tribe that refused to bow. A small tribe, but a proud one. They believed the Mongols were just another group of riders. They believed Genghis Khan was just another leader. They believed they could resist. They were wrong. When the Mongols reached their land, the tribe formed a defensive circle of wagons. They lifted their shields. They prepared their spears. The Mongols stopped. For a moment, silence. Only the wind. Only the trembling of the earth under the horses. Only the smell of fear in the air. Then Genghis Khan whispered to his generals, "Show them what happens to those who stand in our way." The horsemen spread out in a wide arc. Their formation was perfect, like the wings of a giant bird of prey. They moved without sound, without confusion, without hesitation. Then, without warning, they attacked. Arrows filled the sky. Hundreds, then thousands. They fell like rain, tearing through shields, flesh, and earth. Before the tribe could even react, riders were already behind them, cutting off escape. The Mongols moved so fast that the tribe could not tell where the attack was coming from. Front, back, left, right? The answer was simple. Everywhere. Within minutes, the tribe was shattered. Not defeated, destroyed. And the message was delivered. This is what the Mongol invasion means. This is what the horsemen of death bring. The aftermath, I walked through the destroyed camp hours later. The wind was slow, the fires crackled quietly. The smell of smoke and burned wood hung heavy in the air. Genghis Khan stood in the center, staring at the fallen warriors. His face showed no joy, no pride, no regret, only understanding. He knew this was necessary. He knew fear was the foundation of power. He knew terror traveled faster than any messenger. That night, he spoke only one sentence to his generals. When the world trembles, our victory begins. And tremble it did. The messengers of fear. News spread quickly. It spread through traders, refugees, survivors, merchants. They come like a storm. They kill without stopping. They move like ghosts. They don't sleep. They don't tire. They don't forgive. By the time the Mongols reached the next land, the people were already afraid. The sound of hooves frightened children. Smoke in the distance made villages panic. Even the sight of a bird flying low in the sky made people think the Mongols were near. Fear became a weapon stronger than arrows. Some villages surrendered without a fight. Some tribes bowed as soon as they saw dust rising on the horizon. Some leaders offered gifts and horses before the Mongols even arrived. Genghis Khan did not smile at this victory. He only said, "The world opens the door when death knocks." The training of the horsemen. During the march, I witnessed something terrifying. Every night, even after hours of riding, the horsemen trained. They shot arrows while riding at full speed. They practiced turns so sharp that the horse seemed to break the air. They dismounted and remounted in seconds. They shared techniques on how to shoot backward while fleeing, a move known as the Mongol reverse shot, feared everywhere. Their discipline was beyond imagination. One night, a young rider fell from his horse during practice. His instructor looked at him coldly and said, "Get up. The enemy will not wait." The boy stood, bleeding, shaking, and got back on the horse. That is when I understood. This army did not win because of numbers. It won because of heart, because of hunger, because of unbreakable will. The secret of their speed. One of the greatest secrets of the Mongol invasion was their horse system. Every rider had 3 to 5 horses. When one got tired, they switched instantly. This let them travel distances that no other army could. Other armies marched 20-25 miles a day. The Mongols? They traveled 80 to 100 miles without stopping. Imagine the shock. You hear they are 100 miles away. You sleep peacefully. You wake up, and they are already at your gates. This is how empires fall. Not slowly, not gently, but suddenly, like a shadow swallowing light. The meeting with the princes. As the year continued, Genghis Khan sent messengers to nearby lands. His message was simple: join us or face us. Many rulers refused. They believed the Mongols were wild horsemen, brave but not civilized, strong but not organized, fast but not strategic. They did not know they were wrong. They did not know they were speaking about an army led by a mind sharper than any sword. Subutai, the greatest general of the steppe. Jabi, the arrow who never missed. Kassar, the storm of the battlefield. These men were not just warriors, they were geniuses of war. They knew every trick, every strategy, every method to break armies that were bigger, richer, stronger. When Genghis Khan met the princes who bowed to him, he said, "Those who kneel will rise with me. Those who stand will fall beneath me." Those words carried the weight of fate. The silence before the greater invasion. Something begins to change in the air. The Mongol army grows bigger. The horses grow faster. The riders grow stronger. The rumor grows darker. The fear grows deeper. But something else begins too. The world finally realizes that 1206 is not just another year. It is the beginning of an age of fire, the age of the Mongol invasion, the age of the horsemen of death. Every night I look at the horizon, and every night I see the same thing: dust rising, shadows moving, hooves trembling the ground, and a storm waiting to break open. Genghis Khan stands on a hill again, his army behind him, the world in front of him. He lifts his hand, slowly, calmly. Tomorrow, the invasion will grow bigger, darker, faster, deadlier, because the horsemen of death are no longer rising. They are coming. Night was falling across the steppe when the real storm began. The sky was dark, but it wasn't the kind of darkness that brings peace. It was the kind that makes the world hold its breath, the kind that warns you something terrible is coming. The year 1206 was supposed to end quietly, but for the world it was the beginning of its nightmares. The horsemen of death had risen. They had marched. They had tested their strength. Now, they were ready to be unleashed upon kingdoms, upon cities, upon civilizations. This is the final part, the moment when the Mongol invasion becomes a force no one can stop. The night before, the first great empire fell. I still remember that night. The Mongol camp was silent. No singing, no music, no laughter, only the wind whistling through thousands of tents. Horses slept quietly, their sides rising and falling in slow rhythm. Warriors sharpened arrows without speaking. The fires burned low, their glow just enough to show the faces of men who had accepted their destiny. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were men who had given their souls to the purpose of conquest. I watched Genghis Khan walking through the camp. He walked like a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but did not feel its pressure. His steps were steady, controlled, calm. His eyes were sharp, watching every movement, every detail. He was not a king. He was not a general. He was a storm in human form. And tomorrow, he would unleash that storm. The first kingdom that stood against them. The early campaigns of 1206 were only warm-ups, small tribes, small wars, small victories. Now, a real challenge stood ahead, a kingdom with tall walls, strong armies, and proud rulers who believed no one could break them. They believed the Mongols were just fast riders. They believed their walls would save them. They believed the horsemen of death could not cross mountains and rivers. They were wrong. The Mongols had no fear of distance, no fear of weather, no fear of numbers. And when Genghis Khan pointed towards that kingdom, his army moved like a single creature, powerful and hungry. The closer we got, the louder the sound of the horses became. It was like thunder rolling across the plains. Villagers ran, soldiers panicked. Even animals fled from the path of the riders. When we reached the fortress walls, the defenders looked confident. But they did not know the truth. This was not a siege. This was a hunt. The terrifying Mongol strategy. The Mongols did not attack immediately. They surrounded the fortress, cutting off every path, every road, every exit. No one in, no one out. The defenders waited for their enemy to attack. But days passed, and the Mongols stayed silent. Then something strange happened. One morning, the defenders woke to find thousands of campfires burning around them. At night, even more fires appeared, double, triple, growing every night. But the defenders did not know the secret. The Mongols had only half the army there. Each soldier lit 3 fires to make the defenders think the army was 10 times bigger. Fear ate the defenders from the inside. Their confidence died slowly. This was the real power of the Mongol invasion. They didn't only fight with arrows, they fought with the mind. They broke the enemy before the battle even started. The breaking of the wall. On the 5th night, everything changed. The Mongols moved silently, without a single shout or sound. I watched them at work, building siege engines from trees and rocks in a few hours, creating towers and ladders with frightening speed. When dawn broke, the defenders saw something they never expected. The horsemen of death were no longer on horses. They were climbing. They were pushing towers. They were firing flaming arrows. They were everywhere. The sky turned black with arrows. The walls shook under the impact of stones. The screams of the defenders echoed like broken drums. The Mongol attack was not wild. It was not chaotic. It was perfect, like a deadly art. They fired arrows with such accuracy that defenders could not look over the wall without being hit. They moved siege towers with such speed that the walls had no time to prepare. They split into small groups, attacking from different directions, confusing the enemy. And when the gates broke, the horsemen of death entered like shadows, silent, swift, unstoppable. The defenders fought bravely, but bravery meant nothing against a force that moved like wind and struck like lightning. Within hours, the great fortress fell, and the Mongol invasion claimed its first kingdom. The aftermath of conquest. The city that once stood proud was now only smoke and silence. I walked through the streets behind Genghis Khan. He said nothing. He showed no emotion. He simply observed. To him, this was not victory. This was a message to the world. Nothing can save you. No wall is high enough. No army is strong enough. No king is brave enough. The riders roamed the streets, collecting supplies. They took horses, weapons, food, everything needed for the next march. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was ignored. This was not an army that conquered slowly. This was an army that conquered efficiently and moved on. Before the smoke had even cleared, Genghis Khan had already chosen the next target. The invasion would not stop. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. The world begins to break. By the end of 1206, stories traveled far beyond the borders. They come like ghosts. They shoot arrows while riding full speed. They drink the blood of their horses. They attack day and night. They do not get tired. They do not show mercy. In distant lands, kings could not sleep. Soldiers guarded their towns nervously. Villagers prayed to their gods. Some believed the Mongols were demons. Some believed they were punishment from heaven. Some believed they were creatures of the night. But nobody believed they could be stopped. Not anymore. Not after seeing what they did to their first great enemy. The shadow of Genghis Khan. I watched him often during the nights. He stood alone, staring at the stars. He said nothing. He barely moved. But his presence was stronger than any weapon. He had the mind of a king, the heart of a warrior, and the soul of a storm. He did not conquer for gold. He did not conquer for glory. He conquered to fulfill a vision, to unite the world under one rule, his rule. And the frightening part was, he was succeeding. The final march of 1206. Winter was approaching, but the Mongols did not fear the cold. They were born in frozen winds. They were raised in snow. Their horses were faster in winter than other armies were in summer. When other kingdoms hid inside their warm houses, the Mongols advanced. I remember the last march of that year. The wind cut through our clothes. Snowflakes hit our faces like tiny blades. The horses' hooves disappeared into the white ground, but the army never slowed. Ahead, I could see torches, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The flames danced violently in the cold air. Genghis Khan lifted his hand. The entire army stopped instantly, as if time itself had frozen. He looked across the land, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Then he said quietly, but clearly, "This is only the beginning." And in that moment, I understood the truth. 1206 was not the year the invasion ended. It was the year the invasion was born. It was the year the horsemen of death woke up from their silence. It was the year the world began to change forever. The shadow that never stopped the Mongol invasion did not end with one victory. It did not end with one kingdom. It did not end with one year. It spread like a fire that refuses to die. From the freezing mountains of the north to the burning deserts of the south, from the rivers of China to the forests of Eastern Europe, their hooves echoed across continents. Their arrows carved history into the earth. Their speed broke empires. Their shadows darkened the skies of nations. And wherever they went, one name traveled before them: the horsemen of death. The last scene. I still remember the final scene of that year. Genghis Khan stood on a high cliff, the wind blowing fiercely around him. Below him, his army stretched across the land like a giant sea of shadows. The torches flickered. The banners waved. The horses breathed clouds of white mist. I heard him say, not loudly, but with a voice that carried across the cold air, "The world will remember this year, not for how it began, but for the shadow we created." And he was right, because the Mongol invasion of 1206 was not just a chapter in history. It was the beginning of an age of terror, an age of unstoppable power, an age written by hooves, arrows, and fire, the age of the horsemen of death.